shown about responsible management, responsible trade, and responsible consumption. And so I'm really glad we just had the presentation we did because there's been policy, statistics, and beautiful visual imagery. And I can provide none of that. I was never good in math in school, but I can tell a good story. So I'm going to tell you the story of me being a business student turned shark activist, I guess you could call me. This is a photo of my mom and my little sister Rachel and my grandmother and me when I was a little kid on the right. That looks the most mischievous. My grandmother grew up in China, but her parents were killed during the war, and she basically ran away and swam and ran and went on a boat, and she ended up in Hong Kong. She had my mom and 4 siblings. And when they immigrated into Canada, my parents were quite poor, so they worked pretty hard. My grandma took care of me most of my life when I was a kid. And when I was a kid, my grandma loved to do a couple things with me. One was play mahjong, 2 was take me grocery shopping on her back in Chinatown, and 3 was eat dim sum. And one of my favorite things to eat when I was at dim sum was something called chicken feet. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it. It's this weird looking red thing. You suck off the skin and you spit out the bones. Weird, I know. So when I went to school, the teachers would ask me, you know, what's your favorite food, kids? And the kids would be like, ice cream, candy, chocolate, chips, and I'd be like, chicken feet. And my friends would be like, you're so weird. And so I'd go home and cry like a little baby and ask my grandma and say, Grandma, why do we eat chicken feet? Everyone thinks we're weird, and you know, we have things like pig's blood, and I loved pig tongue. That was one of my favorite treats when I was a kid. And she said to me, the reason why we do those things is because when we kill an animal, we like to use every single piece of it. And so that was the story that compelled me to act when I learned about shark fin soup, inspired by the movie Shark Water. So I did do a Bachelor in Business Administration in Marketing and International Business, which is the opposite of science because we like to make stuff up in those areas. When I learned about shark fin soup, I was not only appalled at how ignorant I was because I only had it a couple months before, but I was also very sad to think about the possibility of my people and my culture wiping this beautiful species off the face of this planet for bowls of shark fin soup. So there's been a lot of talk about shark fin soup, and so I just wanted to give some background about the dish. So in Chinese culture, Nick mentioned this in the plenary in the beginning of the conference, but for those of you who have missed it, it's part of something called the Big Four in Chinese cuisine, and that includes abalone, shark fin, sea cucumber, and fish maw, or fish swim bladder. And they all represent different things in Chinese culture: prosperity, wealth, whatever, fertility, and they're often served at banquets, especially wedding banquets. And the analogy I like to use is, for example, turkey at a Thanksgiving dinner. It used to be something that was for the wealthy. An emperor would serve it and say, you know, I can, you know, let my workers risk their lives to fin these sharks and serve you the soup, so aren't I wealthy? And now it's become, because of the growing Chinese middle class and higher class populations, it's become such an ingrained thing that it's no longer just about wealth in terms of having a status, but it's also about sharing wealth. So in the Chinese culture, one thing that we often talk about is, or we often appreciate, is when people share with us. And so for those that may know, when we have a wedding banquet, it's part of that menu. And so the idea is that you're sharing the wealth that you have with those that you have because of the expensive or the high price of this dish. So it, nonetheless, you know, it's still fundamentally wrong. But just to illustrate how little awareness there was, I was studying marketing, and you know, I had an interest in sustainability, but I never knew about shark fin soup, and I only had it a couple months before. Having said that, I also did think markets would save the world, i.e., if I just bought a hybrid car and recycled more, everything would be okay. And then I learned quickly that wasn't true. What I tried to do was talk to people around me, and I start to ask myself, okay, well, what about my community? I live in Vancouver, and there's this highest proportion of Chinese people in Vancouver. 20% of Metro Vancouver is Chinese. That's 400,000 people, nearly 500,000. And it's the second largest Chinese restaurant industry following San Francisco in North America. Just Toronto and Vancouver make up about 70-75% of the Chinese population in Canada. That's a picture of my grandma and my uncle. So after I watched the movie, I didn't really know what to do because I had no tools. I didn't come from a science background, I didn't come from a campaigning background, and I didn't come from a political background, so I started to ask my family members, actually, that's a lie. I didn't ask them anything. I told them not to drink shark fin soup. And I basically harassed them until they started to listen to me. And they said, you know, Claudia, you can try to convince every single person to not have shark fin soup, or you can just talk to the wedding banquets hosts, who are, you know, usually wedding couples or sometimes, you know, anniversaries, baby showers, those types of things. And if they decide not to have it, then nobody has it. And, you know, at these banquets, they're huge. The wedding couple of our last wedding contest, which I'll talk about shortly, had 680 people at their wedding banquet alone. You know, that's a fairly big number, right? So I started to talk to another friend who is a social media guru, and I'm like, dude, what do I do? Like, I'm supposed to figure out how to convince these wedding couples not to serve shark fin soup. I had no idea what a nonprofit even meant at that time, and I was still just basically harassing people. And my friend told me, well, Claudia, you know, you should try to make them feel compelled to act. And why don't you do a wedding contest where couples can submit a photo of themselves that promises or they pledge not to serve shark fin soup, and then, you know, you give them a prize. So I did that. We held a wedding contest last year, sponsored by the Save Our Seas Foundation, and we got 16 couples that entered the contest, 38 in total. The others wanted to pledge privately for their own reasons. We diverted about 4,300 bowls of shark fin soup. This number here, 7,200, includes the bowls that are right now being diverted from wedding couples of this year. So the premise was that these couples would enter their photo in the contest. We put it up on Facebook, and whoever got the most votes won a trip to Mexico to swim with whale sharks. And the winning couples swam with over 100 whale sharks last year. This year, the winning couple is going to Hawaii, and they're going to be cage diving with sharks. So altogether right now we have 7,200 bowls, 55 couples, and we've got over 40 media hits. And this is based with 10 volunteers, and I would say maybe 500 to 700 volunteer hours in the past 2 years since I founded the organization. After I realized I couldn't just do what I wanted, I actually have to register stuff. So we decided to become an organization. Nick also mentioned this in the plenary, that it's about 10 bowls of shark fin, or 10 to 20 bowls of shark fin that would take about one shark. So if you do, I did the calculations actually just last night, and so I'm confident that by our 2-year anniversary, which is generally World Oceans Day this coming June, we'll have at least 8,000 bowls. And so $8,000, 8,000 bowls, that's $1 a bowl. And you can do the math probably better than I can, but I think it's something around $10 to $20 per shark. So just for fun, this is a screenshot of the wedding contest this year and all the couples that have entered so far. There's probably another one that's happening right now. These are some of the entries from this year, and just for fun, I'll let you read the subtitles. So if you're a Seinfeld fan, you'll understand the left one. So what does this translate to? You know, 10 volunteers, lots of volunteer hours, Facebook fans. Well, it translates to awareness. Just to illustrate how little awareness is, I have an uncle, he owns a restaurant, and when I was telling him not to serve shark fin soup or drink it anymore, he said, well, when you fin the sharks, don't the fins grow back? And so I was baffled, and then I quickly realized that he of course doesn't know this because he's never been in the ocean. He also grew up in a very poor village where they didn't have access to very much nature in general in Hong Kong. And so I started to realize that attacking people just didn't work anymore. I had to understand where they came from as an individual and as a culture. And I realized that, my parents were very hard-working immigrants, and I got a very lucky life where I could question these type of things and do things that I love, but they were never able to do that. So I try to come from a place of understanding. And something that we're doing in addition to the wedding contest this year is we're going to do a soup cooking contest in September and October to encourage chefs to create shark fin-free soup alternatives and, of course, other endangered animal species free. And the idea behind this is that it builds a sense of physical community, and it also brings together really diverse stakeholders. Chinese chefs, restaurants, media, consumers, politicians, community groups, and Chinese businesses. And this is something that's never been really done before in the Chinese community, to my knowledge, in Vancouver when it comes to environmental issues. So how does this relate to the rest of the world? Well, we know that 95% of shark fins actually consumed in Asia. So a lot of people ask me, that probably means that Vancouver is a relatively small amount of consumption. And I said, yeah, you're totally right. But the idea behind our work is that we create models that we can share with other groups. So the wedding contest is something that we're going to share with Hong Kong shark conservation groups. And basically, I have a philosophy of think global, act local. We have a test market, we have something to work with, so why not do that and export it where we can? And this is important because, there's a lot of damn Chinese people in this world. There's over 1.6 billion of us, and there's little pockets of Chinese people everywhere, I can promise you that. So what does this all mean? This is a photo of my family, and you can tell I'm not the only crazy one. And I just want to talk about my experience with this change. And I'm really glad someone brought up the power of responsible consumers. I mean, we definitely don't need everyone. In the 1700s, 3 people stood up against slavery when 75% of the world was enslaved. So I don't think that, my personal view is that I don't think I need to stop every Chinese person who drinks shark fin soup from drinking it, but we definitely need to garner and harness a small group of them. The second thing that I want to really talk about is the power of storytelling, and storytelling in a way that creates emotion and value, just like some of the photos that Thomas showed us, because I know, at least in my family and in my community, it's not facts that are stopping people from acting, it's the lack of emotion, the lack of values, and I think it's through the power of storytelling that we can do that the most. Another thing that I really want to quickly touch on, the third thing, is that when I first watched Shark Water and learned about shark finning, these were the type of images that I saw, and this was the approach that I took to talking to my family members when it came to shark fin soup. I said, look at all these horrible images, look at these bloody sharks, like they're dying, and finning's horrible, and blah, 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 how could you just drink it, you're a bad person. And I quickly realized that, when people deal with issues, they often go through what I call the 5 stages of grief. Everybody probably knows about this. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. So for example, when it comes to climate change, first some people, we're all on a certain level in denial about climate change, but why is this can't be happening, it's not real. And then anger, what the hell are wrong with human beings? And then bargaining, well, if I recycled and bought a hybrid car, I think everything would be okay. And then depression, I can't do anything about it, and that's kind of the end of the day. And when we get to acceptance, we're able to reach a place where, although we know the facts, we feel compelled to act because we can move forward. And this was one of the big lessons I learned, is that as much as I wanted to paint the nightmare, we also have to paint the heaven and show people the places they have to go. And so when I showed people these images of people making change, that's the winning couple, Ty and Juliana, at their wedding banquet. The left is a photo of their wedding banquet table, and the right is definitely not shark fin soup, it's a chicken soup. And the bottom photos are them on their Mexico trip swimming with whale sharks. When I showed people these images, people were inspired to change. And so my lesson from this was that as much as we arouse people, we also have to fulfill them. And that's what the wedding contest, I feel, and the soup cooking contest does. It creates a channel for participation and engagement, because I think not only in shark fin, whatever issues you're talking about, people are kind of sick and tired getting their fingers wagged at them, right? We have to give them a channel to engage in. And so I don't know how much time I have left. I'm okay? Okay,
yeah,
so...
Okay.
Yeah?
Carry on.
So I just wanted to say that, it was through the values that my grandmother taught me, that instilled in me till this day, that encouraged me to stand up for what I believe in. And if I didn't have those